Now that you've learned helpful strategies to use during the tutoring session, let's take a moment to review activities. Prior to your session, the classroom computer will be sitting in a virtual queue, waiting for you to connect. When your call is answered and you indicate that your student is available, your computer connects with the classroom computer in the virtual queue. Unlike screen sharing, your computer and the classroom computer are independent, even though they display the same material. As the tutor, you control the session and decide what activities to show your student. While we have suggestions about the time you could spend on each activity, do remember that this is not set in stone. Feel free to experiment with what works best for you and the child you're supporting. The first activity in the sequence is flashcards. Flashcards has two functions. It gives students the opportunity to practice sight words, and it tests students' knowledge of words that have similar beginning or ending sound patterns. These are also known as onsets and rhymes. Practicing sight words and onsets and rhymes will help your student increase reading proficiency. Spend 5 minutes at the beginning of your session on flashcards. Once your student is reading at level G, discontinue playing flashcards and focus more time on reading. When playing flashcards, click on a word. Your student will see the same word on their screen. Each time your student gets a word correct, mark the word green by clicking on the green button. If your student struggles with a word or gives an incorrect response, mark the card red by clicking on the red button. Your student will only see the words you show them and will not see the words you've color-coded in green or in red. To confirm your student has received the flashcard you sent, watch for the Sending to and Received by prompt. This feature is available for every activity and will help you gauge when the student can see the material you sent. The next activity in the series is stories. Reading stories out loud is the practice students need most. Ideally, you should spend 15 to 20 minutes reading stories each week. When you're ready to read a story, click on the story icon from the activity menu. Select the appropriate reading level and click Continue to open the story library. A library of leveled books will be displayed on both your screen and on the student's screen. The student will tell you which book he or she would like to read by giving you the number next to the book title. Depending on what level your student is reading at, there are two different types of stories to choose from: reading stories and decodable stories. Reading stories are included at each reading level and use words that students are learning in first grade. By reading these stories, students are increasing their word knowledge and practicing newly learned words. The library also includes stories that are written to help students learn to decode words. These decodable stories are included in levels C and D only. The repeated readings of the decodable stories help readers with fluency and word recognition, especially as it relates to phonics patterns and high-frequency words students often see in first-grade text. At the higher levels, reading stories include very engaging texts, covering varying topics, many of which are sponsored by our partners. Some include science-related content about Earth, space exploration, and chemistry. Let's take a look at a typical story. When you choose a story from the library, the child will see page 1 of that story on their screen. While you can advance the stories forward using the arrow keys, your student will not have that option and can only see the page number. You might decide to look through the whole book with your student before reading it. You can mention some of the key words and give them a sense of the story before they read it, which can boost the confidence of early or reluctant readers. When you start to read each page, you can help the student prepare to read by asking them to look at the picture and describe what they think the story is about or what might happen next. You may also want to take turns reading with your student if they often struggle. You could alternate reading each page. This is a good way of taking the pressure off, as well as model fluent expressive reading. As you read, you may want your student to focus on a particular word. You can do this in 2 ways. First, you can click on a word on your screen which will highlight the word on the child's view of the page. Or you can show that word to your student by typing in the message box. For example, if your student is struggling with the word sing, you can type the word in the message student box and send that word to your student. Remind them to sound it out using their phonics, but don't hesitate to give them the word if they seem stuck. When you send the word to your student in this way, it will appear for them as if it was spoken by a small owl in the top left of the screen. Asking them what the owl is saying is a good way to check they can see the word you've sent. Asking questions about the story is a good way to see if your student is able to remember the key points of the story. But helping a child develop their comprehension skills is about much more than asking questions to test their memory. Comprehension is about developing connections between what they've seen in the book and the world they understand. Can the student tell you about the story in their own words, or make connections between the story and their own experiences? How would they feel if they were a character in the story? Having empathy with characters helps create thoughtful readers. Not all stories include comprehension questions, but feel free to spend time asking your student about the story when you're finished reading. Did they like it? If so, why? If a story does include comprehension questions, they will be presented on your screen at the end of the story. The student's screen will display pictures to help them remember what the story is about. If you selected I Speak Spanish when you registered, you may be paired with an early English language learner. When reading stories with your student, you'll have the option to toggle between the English and Spanish version. This will help support word learning if your student is struggling with a passage in English. If the student is struggling with the English version of the text, flip to the Spanish version. Reading the passage in Spanish will help the student better understand the context of the story when reading the same passage in English. In addition to providing stories for practicing reading and fluency skills, we also provide students with word games designed to build knowledge of words and word parts. You can fit these in between stories or at the end of your session. To view step-by-step directions, click on the Directions link at the top of each page. In the word sort activity, students will practice sorting words based on their word endings. This is a great practice for students learning how to sound out words. As the tutor, you will select the word from the menu. Your student will only see the same word you select. Ask your student where the word belongs based on the word ending. Once you click on the appropriate box, the word will populate and the student will see the same word on their screen. Once all of the words have been placed in a box, draw your student's attention to the similarities of the words. Then, have your student read the words in each box. 3 in a row is a favorite activity for many students. This additional exposure to words will help encourage fluent reading and word identification. When you're ready to begin, determine who will be an X and who will be an O. Notice each box has a word. Your students can see the same words. Taking turns, you and your student will try to be the first to get 3 X's or O's in a row, up, down, across, or diagonally. When you place an X or an O in the box, your student will see the same thing on their screen. Mystery word is a fun way of learning vocabulary and will help students remember the spelling of new words. To begin, think of a word or use one of the suggested words found on the right side of your screen. The student cannot see these words. When you have the word in mind, click the number that matches the number of letters in the word. Your student will see the same number of blank spaces on their screen. As your student begins to guess letters, click the letter on the keyboard. This will highlight that letter for both you and your student. Place the cursor on the appropriate line and select the letter using your computer keyboard. Your student will see each letter on their screen. You may find your student needs a little help getting started with this activity. Consider filling in the first letter, or offering a clue to help your student guess the word. Word World is a fun way for students to practice spelling and word patterns. To play, spin the wheel to begin. A word will appear on your screen, but the student will not see the word. The spinner will stop on a letter, which will populate on the student's screen. Click No to continue spinning until there are enough letters for the student to guess what the word might be, or until the student can read the word on the screen. Click Yes when the student guesses the word or play the game again. The whiteboard simulates a magnetic board and is great for practicing spelling, difficult words, or making up fun stories. Type a word or phrase in the field at the bottom of the screen. When you click Submit Word, your student will see the same word or phrase on their screen. You can also move words and phrases around by dragging anywhere on the board. While it may be tempting to spend more time with your student, please end your session promptly at the end of 30 minutes. There may be another tutor scheduled immediately after your session, and the system only allows for one tutoring session to be running at a time.